Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into a pretty wild side of American history, actually, organized crime, and some truly incredible heists.
Yeah, heists, exactly.
You know, we saw that you flagged the Mob Museum's list, their top 5 mob-related heists. And we know you. You like to really get into things, but without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Right.
So that's exactly what we're going to do. Pull out the most interesting bits, the most insightful details from these really notorious events.
Absolutely. And it's telling, I think, that the Mob Museum chose these specific 5. They have like 3 main things they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Strong mob ties, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but also compelling stories and, gotta have it, a huge amount of loot, stolen goods.
Yeah, well, the typical mob operation might not have involved, breaking into a bank or a museum.
Right.
But these high-profile robberies, they really show us something different about their reach, their methods, just how they operated, on a different level.
Yeah, different scale, yeah.
So let's just jump right in. Our first heist takes us back to 1962, the Plymouth Mail robbery.
Okay.
And it's called the Great Plymouth Mail Robbery for a reason. They got away with $1.5 million from a mail truck.
Wow.
Carrying bank deposits. And that was the biggest cash robbery in U.S. history at that time. Can you imagine, that much cash all in one place back then?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? And the way they pulled it off, too, it's like something out of a movie. Police uniforms, stopping traffic. It speaks to their confidence, I guess. Or maybe desperation.
Maybe a little of both.
Yeah, who knows?
So the main players here, John, they called him Red Kelly.
Red Kelly.
And George Biliagi Satellis.
Okay.
Now, Kelly, he wasn't a made man, officially in the mob.
Right.
But he was definitely working within their world. I mean, he even admitted to being a hitman. For Raymond Patriarca, that's a pretty serious mob boss in New England.
Oh, yeah, Patriarca, big name.
So it seems like Kelly and Aggie, they were the brains behind this whole operation. But what's interesting is Kelly's position. Not officially in, but clearly connected. What does that tell us about how the mob actually wielded its influence?
It shows you it wasn't always so cut and dry. Their power structure. Guys like Kelly could operate within their network, pulling off big jobs, kicking up a cut probably to the higher-ups, but not necessarily being, official members. It was more fluid, more about opportunity.
So it's like you don't have to be in to be in.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got Jerry Anguillo, a mob boss from Boston.
Right.
And his involvement really drives the point home.
Yeah. Anguillo, he put up, they say, around $7,000 for, expenses, the disguises, the shotguns.
Oh, wow.
And he was key in laundering the money afterwards. This really gets to the heart of what the Mob Museum's saying, right? Even if the guys pulling off the heist aren't, card-carrying members, the mob still gets their share. It's like a silent partnership in crime.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't just about, grabbing the money. It was about what happened after. Having those connections, that network to clean the cash, make it disappear. And then there's the story about the other planner, Biliagi Satellis.
Yeah.
It gets, kind of dark.
Yeah.
He cooperated with the authorities.
Yeah.
And then vanished. Poof. Gone. And later, a mob hitman claimed he'd, taken care of him.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty stark reminder about the consequences of crossing these guys. You know what I mean?
No kidding. And get this, they had a huge investigation, 5 years. They spent, get this, as much on the investigation as they lost in the robbery. $1.5 million.
No way.
And nobody was ever convicted. It's almost unbelievable. All that money gone, and no one's held accountable. What does that say about, law enforcement's ability to actually go after organized crime back then?
I mean, it speaks volumes, right? The mob's code of silence.
Yeah.
Intimidating witnesses, their ability to, cover their tracks. It made getting convictions incredibly tough, even with all those resources thrown at it.
All right, so let's fast forward a bit. 10 years, 1972, the Pierre Hotel heist in New York City.
Okay.
Now, this one, it really upped the stakes, became the biggest hotel heist in history. They got away with an estimated $3 million, and that's probably a low estimate.
Wow.
Cash, bonds, jewelry, all from safe deposit boxes. And here's the kicker, they targeted wealthy guests, specifically the morning after New Year's Eve.
Smart.
Figuring, right, that the safe deposit boxes would be full of valuables from the night before. Talk about a calculated risk. Was this type of really specific targeting, was that a new trend in these kind of heists?
It shows, I think, a shift in strategy, more precise, identifying those high-value targets.
Okay.
The mob's in the mix here, too. It goes through a Lucchese crime family associate, Christie. They called him the Tick Fernari.
The Tick?
Yeah. And he apparently gave the okay and pulled in some other Lucchese guys. So even if the planners themselves weren't, big bosses, they needed the mob's approval. They relied on their network.
This whole heist is just full of these crazy characters and wild events. You've got these professional burglars, Sammy Nolow and Bobby Comfort.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those guys.
They had a history of robbing hotels. They even supposedly robbed Sophia Loren once. I mean, these weren't just, small-time crooks. What does that tell us about how the mob approached these bigger, more complex heists?
Well, it tells me they were pragmatic. When they had a big job and it needed specific skills, they brought in the experts, outsiders even. But they had to be reliable or controllable. I mean, you got that story about Comfort, right? Having an affair with the hotel's assistant bookkeeper just to get the inside scoop on the safe deposit boxes.
That's unbelievable.
It is, isn't it? I mean, did other heists of this scale often rely on that kind of, personal connection, that insider knowledge?
It definitely highlights how important those insider informants were in a lot of these successful heists, yeah. And then you've got this almost comical scene happening in the lobby during a robbery. A Brazilian guest, his brand new wife, and his mistress all run into each other while the heist is going on upstairs.
You can't make this stuff up. It's like a sitcom in the middle of a serious crime.
Right. And then there's this hostage. She has a heart attack during the whole thing. And the robbers, they actually call 911.
Oh, come on.
They're in the middle of stealing millions of dollars. And suddenly they're worried about getting hit with a murder charge.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Like their priorities are just so skewed.
And to top it all off, they give $20 tips to the hotel staff they'd held hostage. But they stiffed the security guards.
Why?
They said they had cop mentalities.
Oh, brother.
It's this weird mix of criminal professionalism and just petty grudges. What do you make of that kind of behavior?
It's a twisted sense of logic, a way to justify what they're doing, I guess, by being, quote unquote, nice to the staff. Maybe they're trying to lessen any resistance, or maybe even trying to create this image that they're not the bad guys, really. And the whole thing with the security guards, it probably comes down to, authority figures. They don't like authority.
Right.
But just like the Plymouth Mail heist, despite some arrests for, having the stolen goods, no one was ever convicted for the Pierre Hotel robbery itself.
Yeah.
It just goes to show, even when you know who did it, actually getting convictions in these complex mob-related cases, incredibly difficult.
Okay, so let's move on to 1975, the Bonded Vault heist. Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay.
Now, this one is really interesting. The target wasn't a bank. It wasn't a hotel. It was a private vault company inside a fur storage facility. Yeah. And this vault was famous or infamous for holding the patriarcha crime families. Let's call it their dirty money. It's like they robbed themselves.
That's wild. So are you saying the mob robbed the mob?
That's the rumor, and it's a pretty strong one, that the whole thing was orchestrated by the boss himself, Raymond Patriarcha. He planned the robbery of his own organization's, let's say, unofficial bank.
I mean, that's next level audacious if it's true. But why? What would be the point?
That's the million-dollar question. It's like he wanted a Bader cut, and he just decided to cut everyone else out, even himself, in a way. They had 8 guys. One of them was Robert. They called him the Deuce Dussault.
The Deuce?
He was the one who rounded up all the employees. They tried to drill the safes, but it didn't work, so they just went at it with crowbars.
Oh, wow.
Pretty crude compared to some of the other more elaborate heists we've talked about.
I guess sometimes, even in the world of organized crime, simple works. What'd they get away with?
Estimates are all over the place, from $2 million all the way up to $30 million. Cash, gold, silver, gems, guns. The fact that the estimates are so different, it tells you something about what was in there.
Yeah, probably a lot of stuff that was, shall we say, off the books.
Exactly. A lot of secrets hidden even from the mob itself, maybe. And then you've got the classic betrayal. Dussault flips, starts cooperating with the authorities, and he spills the beans on Patriarcha's involvement. Leads to some convictions, but some acquittals too. What a mess. What does that kind of infighting and betrayal tell us about these organizations? Are they really as tight-knit as they seem?
It shows you, at the end of the day, they're not invincible. They might try to project this image of loyalty, but when there's that much money involved, self-preservation, greed, It wins out.
Okay, let's jump ahead a few more years. 1978, the Lufthansa heist at JFK Airport. You know, the one from Goodfellas?
Oh, yeah, classic.
At the time, it was the biggest cash robbery in America. $5 million in cash, almost $900,000 in jewels.
Wow.
The Goodfellas connection, it definitely makes it legendary. But what makes it so significant in the history of the mob? Beyond the movie, I mean.
It's interesting because the idea, it didn't come from inside the mob. It came from two Lufthansa employees, Peter Grunwald and Louis Werner.
Ah, so inside men again.
Exactly. They knew the airport security, the cash handling procedures. Yeah. Inside information is key, right?
For sure. And Werner, he had some gambling debts. So he takes the idea to his bookie, Martin Krugman. Krugman brings in a Lucchese associate, Henry Hill. And from there, it goes up the ladder to Jimmy the Gent Burke.
Burke, yeah.
He gets the final approval from the Lucchese capo, Paul Vario. A capo's like a captain, a high-ranking leader in the mafia. So it shows you how these worlds, you know, legitimate business and organized crime, they can overlap, especially when there's a huge potential payday.
Yeah, money talks. And Werner, he gave all the critical details to the mobster Joe. They called him Buddha Monry.
Buddha Monry.
Maps, schedules, everything. And then a stroke of luck.
Yeah.
A second cash shipment arrives. No one expected it. The amount they steal, it just skyrockets.
Wow, a criminal jackpot.
But like you see in Goodfellas, things get messy fast.
Yeah, the violence.
The getaway driver, they kill him for not getting rid of the van, and then all these other people connected to the heist end up dead. It was a bloodbath. That's the mob, protecting their interests, especially with that kind of money on the line. It makes you wonder about, you know, trust within these organizations.
Right, like if they'll turn on their own so easily.
Exactly. There's a deep paranoia there.
Yeah.
Anyone who could be a loose end, they eliminate them. The Lufthansa heist, it's a warning, you know, about success and failure in the mob world. And despite the huge scale of it, the violence, the only guy who did serious time for the actual heist was Louis Werner, the inside man.
Wow.
It just goes to show, prosecuting these complex mob operations incredibly difficult, even with all the evidence.
Okay, our last heist, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. Boston, 1990. This one, it's different.
How so?
It's the biggest art theft in history. 13 masterpieces gone. Vermeer, Rembrandt, Degas, Manet, just vanished. And unlike the others, where it was clearly about the money, this one, the motive's always been a bit murky. Two guys dressed as cops, they talk their way in after hours, duct tape and handcuff the security guards. The whole thing takes like an hour. And they even took the security tapes, like they wanted to erase themselves completely.
That's eerie.
And with the other heists, we saw the mob was either directly involved or working through associates, right?
Right.
But the Gardner Museum theft, it's always been speculation. One theory was that it was Whitey Bulger, the Winter Hill Gang boss. Maybe he was going to use the art as leverage or funding for the IRA.
The Irish Republican Army.
Yeah, but that never really panned out. Bulger never said a word.
Why do you think the mob keeps coming up as a suspect, even without clear evidence?
They have a history, right? Yeah. High-value thefts, their networks, their ability to move and hide things makes them a natural suspect, even if it's not always, you know, based in fact. The FBI has been looking into Boston Mafia guys for years.
Yeah.
There's a story about Robert Guarente, supposedly had some of the artwork, might have passed it on to Robert Gentile. They found a handwritten list of the stolen paintings at Gentile's place.
Yeah. He denies it, of course, but it makes you wonder.
And then you have the story about Bobby Donati. He was murdered not long after the heist, but right before, supposedly, he confessed, said he stole the paintings to try and get a mob capo out of prison.
Wow.
And there's even a guy, a former jeweler, who claims Donati showed him a piece from the museum, an eagle finial, looked exactly like the one that was stolen. It's a tangled web of rumors, connections, dead ends. And to make things even weirder, the duct tape and handcuffs from the scene, they disappeared from evidence years later.
No kidding.
Still unsolved. The artwork's still out there. $10 million reward, still unclaimed. It's a real mystery. These priceless masterpieces just gone.
It really captures the imagination, doesn't it? So looking back at these 5 heists chosen by the Mob Museum, what strikes me is how different they all are.
Yeah.
The planning, the targets, how much the mob was directly involved, meticulous operations, opportunistic grabs. Sometimes they were the masterminds. Sometimes they just wanted their cut.
Definitely. And there were a few things that really stood out to me. How important inside informants were. for one. And the Pierre Hotel robbery with all those crazy coincidences, and of course, the Gardner Museum theft. That mystery, those potential mob connections, it's fascinating.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, you wanted to get a good grasp on this part of history without getting overwhelmed. Hopefully this deep dive gave you a focused and engaging look at these events. Each one is a glimpse into the world of organized crime, the audacity of these guys, pulling off these sometimes unbelievable heists.
And thinking about all this, it makes you wonder, what drives people and organizations to go to these lengths? And why are we still so fascinated by these crimes even decades later?
Good questions.
It's something to think about, for sure. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into these truly legendary heists.